you here. And this meeting is being recorded. So if you haven't been to any of our forums before, we record them all and then they're available for you to view later or to have other parents take a look and get those answers. So we will have that available on our website later. We would like to go ahead and get started. I'm going to have Assistant Superintendent Harlan share a PowerPoint that we have built for you tonight. We have really 3 areas to cover with you tonight, and how these typically go is we share new information with you or updates of information with you. And but we encourage you to ask questions as they come up for you in the chat. We will wait and get through all of the content, and then we will answer questions in the chat after we have gotten through all of the content tonight. So please, if you have specific questions that you want to make sure that we address tonight, I'll give you a little overview of what we will be talking about. We're going to be covering 3 areas. First, just what's happening right now in schools. So we'll talk just very briefly about vaccines and quarantines. We will talk very briefly as well about high school schedules and forecasting and what and graduation, what that planning is looking like. And then we will, and you can go ahead and forward on, I think the agenda is on the next page. And then on where we go next, we will talk about our plans for the summer, and we're going to have Heather Stefka share a little bit with us about that. And then we're going to go into what we know about next school year. And that section really is going to focus mostly on the budget that has been built for next school year, that has been presented to the budget committee. We have budget committee chair Chris Norman, who is joining us, and we are really happy to have him. He will be joining us a little bit later in the meeting, so we'll get through the first 2 chunks of information. If Chris isn't here yet, we'll wait a little to jump into the budget component, so that he is here to both hear that part of the presentation, but then also Chris is really wanting to gather your questions or your feedback regarding the budget and how it's been built, so that he can bring that back and we can bring that back to the budget committee as they go about their work. So let's just get started with introductions to district staff. My name is Melissa Goff. I am the superintendent of the school district. Glad to be here tonight and glad that you are all here. And I will let Lisa go next.
Hi, my name is Lisa Harlan and I'm the assistant superintendent here in GAPS.
And then we have Jim Scherzinger on the call. He is our interim director of finance. We have our curriculum coordinator, Stacy Lee, on the call. I see she just turned her camera on. We have our newest hire, Emily Elliott, on the call. She is working with Andrew Tomsky, who helps coordinate everything with communications. So sometimes you will hear us ask Andrew and Emily to please remind us to do something. We have Katie Alabeck on the call. Katie does all of the work around early learners. She has been fantastic for us in that work. And we may have other staff on the call that I'm just unable to see. I see Mr. Engel from the high school. And I see Cheryl Clementson from AOL, and I may be missing other folks, but just want to make sure that you know who's on the call with us tonight. So let's jump right into where we are. And we are right now at a point in time where, and go ahead, one more slide, where we are getting a lot of questions, particularly right now around vaccination and around quarantining. I would say quarantine questions have been really a big topic of conversation, with questions coming in, particularly in schools where we have had cohorts of students who have needed to be quarantined due to COVID-19 positive tests or presumed positive outcomes for students or staff. And then also if we have had larger cohorts quarantined, what does that mean and for how long? And And then we've also had questions around the vaccinations. So starting with quarantine, just to let folks know that one of the things that we did as we were getting questions from community members and really trying to explain all of the information that we have. And thank you for your patience and in talking with multiple folks. We appreciate your interest in making sure that kids are in school as much as possible. We agree, we want kids in school as much as possible. And sometimes, unfortunately, where we're sitting is if students have been exposed, then the quarantine and the 14-day quarantine really goes into effect. We met with Linn County Public Health and the Oregon Health Authority and the Oregon Department of Education early last week, and we received a letter from Oregon Health Authority and the Oregon Department of Education on Friday, which was sent out, I think, to all of our families today, outlining their perspective on the work that we have been doing around quarantining and other protocols that we've been doing in relationship to controlling COVID-19 and the spread. And that letter was very supportive of all of the decisions that we've made. So we are continuing, however, to hope that we are able to control the number of positive cases before we ever need to get to quarantine, which leads us to vaccinations. So as you know, before we had kids return to school, we created the opportunity for staff to be able to have their first and second vaccination shots, and then for it to be 2 weeks beyond staff's opportunity to fully vaccinate before we had students come back to school. We felt that was the safest way for us to reopen, and we've been really pleased to see how that has helped. We recognize that vaccinations are definitely one important way for us to control the spread of the virus. And we have right now vaccinations that are currently, just newly, we have new approval for down to 12 years old with one of the vaccines. But that's just at the US level. Oregon is still reviewing that information to make a final decision on the Oregon vaccination. But we do know that we have vaccinations currently available for kids down to 16 years of age. And there were a lot of questions around vaccines this last week because we have partnered with local health agencies in order to offer vaccination clinics in our neighborhood schools, which are the three high schools, the two comprehensive and then AOS. And those are scheduled for, I think, the next 6 Tuesdays. We have one going on right now at West Albany High School. We've had really great attendance today and are pleased to see so many folks from 16 years and up who were taking advantage of that. One of the things we wanted to make sure to address tonight are some of the questions that we have had that the nurses in particular have had around the vaccines and the potential just questions that people weren't sure of the answers. So one is around does COVID-19 alter DNA? And no, it doesn't. It doesn't enter into a cell's nucleus and cannot change DNA. Another myth is that it isn't safe because of the quick rollout. But the fact is that thorough safety standards and trials were met in approving it at the stages that it has been approved for different age levels. People have been worried because they might be breastfeeding or might be pregnant, and those folks are eligible still to get the vaccine. And folks have asked if they'll get COVID from the vaccine. And just like our other vaccines, you don't actually get the illness from the vaccine, but the vaccine does protect you. Sometimes people think because they've already had COVID, they may not need to get the vaccine, but since we don't know the length that natural immunity will last, because we just simply don't know very much about some aspects of COVID-19 still, It's still recommended by medical professionals that folks get vaccinated if they're going to, even if they've had COVID. And then some folks think that maybe we don't need to have masks or social distancing anymore because of the percentage of vaccinated folks. And right now, we're still being expected to have those things in place because those precautions are part of what medical professionals are saying will help us really get to the end of the pandemic. So we appreciate all of the challenges with considering for you and your family about when you're wearing masks and how far to sit apart even when you're at home. And we know that it has been a really long period of time, 14 months, I think, since we originally closed school. And that can be really exhausting and grating and trying for all of us. And we just saw the governor release today that when 70% of residents 16 and older are vaccinated in the state of Oregon, that then we're going to see a lot of these protocols that are required right now be lifted. So we believe that this is a pathway for us to not only have fewer quarantines, but clearly fewer sicknesses, fewer deaths, and hopefully eventually fewer steps that we need to take around some of those protocols that have so changed our lives. So wanted to make sure you had that information about the vaccine and quarantine. And then wanted to share with you just a quick update. Right now, our high school, we have a team from each of the 2 comprehensive high schools who have been working on coming to an agreement on a common schedule for the 2 high schools to use next year. I know they had another meeting today. I haven't spoken to anyone from that meeting yet, so not sure how the outcomes from that ended up, but we will hear those, I'm sure, within the next day. And so they're still working on that, and the 2 high schools will be on a common schedule next year. We have already arranged for transportation to be able to occur between the 2 high schools so that students are able to sign up for classes that may not be offered at their home high school, but because of some of these really great CTE space renovations in particular, may be of interest to them to take. So we want to make sure that kids can sign up and take those classes and have transportation provided. So that is being made available for kids next year. So even if kids have done forecasting, they may need to do additional forecasting depending on the scheduling decisions that are made at the end from this team and then from the high schools themselves. The other piece to know is that we are still planning to have graduation. We aren't planning to have graduation in the same way. Sorry, that slide is kind of funny. I obviously tried to make it multiple ways. We are still planning to have graduation, but it will look different than last year. So if you attended one of the graduation ceremonies last year, we had a drive-in graduation ceremony and folks graduated in cohorts. We were out at the fairgrounds in the parking lot there. It was really unique and there were a lot of really neat, fun aspects to that. We also know, however, that a lot of our high school kids and families have really strong feelings about their alma mater or the school from which they are graduating. And so schools feel strongly that it would be great to be able to have the West and the South ceremonies respectively in their own stadiums. And so that is the plan that they are working on right now. We are beholden to Lynn County numbers and what will be allowed based on the Lynn County COVID numbers. Right now, we are in the red zone again. And so we are really hoping that we will see those numbers reverse and go back down again. We've brought them down before. We're hoping we'll be able to bring them down again. And the high school leadership teams have been working hard on what to do in order to help more people be able to participate and be present for our high school ceremonies. So where we go next is into summer. So we have had the good fortune of being able to plan with our neighborhood and community partners who throughout COVID, I mean, prior to COVID clearly, but definitely throughout COVID have leaned in with us in incredible and unique ways to try and make sure that students have opportunities to learn even when there are limitations to what we're able to offer at school, particularly when everyone was in CDL. So partners such as the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA really stepped up, our childcare partners as well. We're continuing to work with those partners around some impressive summer opportunities and adding into that extensive partnering with Lynn Benton Community College, with the City of Albany, Parks and Rec, and the library, and another of other partners who are simply interested in finding ways for students to have interesting and meaningful things to do during the summer. And sometimes that might mean credit recovery or credit acceleration. And sometimes it just might mean having a fun camp to go to during the day that gets them out of their house. So I have Heather Huzepka has been able to join the call, and she is going to be able to tell you guys a little bit more about what those plans are looking like now. And Heather, if you can take about 5 minutes to do that, that would be great.
I will. Thank you. Help me keep on time, because if I start talking about summer and kids and activities, I could take more than 5 minutes. But the goal is, we did receive grant funding to really think big this summer. You know, districts received some support knowing that our kids have been out of school. And Melissa, you did a great job reaching out to community partners to have an initial conversation to say, if the funding's there, what could we create? And so we did have Boys and Girls step up, in YMCA, OSU Kids Spirit, or STEM activities, LBCC, our own district staff looking to put together a district summer program for 5 weeks, kind of in the middle chunk of the summer. What it's coming down to now, we're getting to the details of being able to tell families, this is what we know is possible. Parks and Rec, adding additional classes to their schedule. But it does come down to capacity of, you have to have people running the groups, running the classes, and doing that, and then connecting with families who are interested in doing a piece of the summer or the whole summer, and including transportation to cut down that barrier. So some programs, the Park and Rec, really helping think big, because they have the capacity to hold classes at different places, different times of the day. YMCA has been a great partner, but they may be more limited in the number of additional spots they have available. YMCA as well, they have a pre-K program. We're running our pre-Ks. So what I want parents to know is that more information is coming, and the goal is to not have a financial barrier for you to have your children or your teen participate in activities. We're going to use our grant funds to help take that barrier away. We're going to look at a transportation system to help take that barrier away, although there may be some unique situations that we just can't meet. And that it's not all or nothing. It's not, if you want to come to the summer program, you're committing to all 5 weeks, but perhaps there's 3 weeks that really do fit your schedule, and we'll work with you on that as well. We have teachers, licensed staff in our district who are doing their own specialty camps, maybe around science, or we have a high school teacher who's looking to maybe do some building projects at South using their space as well. Definitely looking at our high schools and the new beautiful spaces that our community has supported in building, and how do we get kids in those spaces. It's finding the staff, making sure staff have the break if they need that. Every summer you want to rejuvenate, and then just putting the schedule together. So it's really, we're kind of on the tip of being able to share even more details, including a landing website that will help parents be able to see what options are, signing up through us, or perhaps signing up directly with these community partners. And each partner is a little different. And so that's a bit of the puzzle that we have some teacher leaders helping us put together. On that, I can answer questions our panel might have, or
Did you see I raised my
No.
hand electronically?
Okay.
I wasn't sure. And so Heather, you can give me the eye, like, I don't know if we're ready to say that yet, but I think we are.
But I think we are.
Of the exciting opportunities through Lynn Benton Community College, for example, they will have camps that are weekly for middle school and high school students that are everything from career exploration to creative writing, and all of those are free of charge for any GAP students. They'll also have classes for high school students that high school students can take for high school credit or college credit. That could be to get ahead or because they're needing to get more credits. And that, again, will be free of charge for students. So using all of the summer grants that we have to be able to say, okay, what opportunities are there? Parks and Rec, great. How many of our kids can we get signed up? And that the district would cover the cost of the registration. But I know, for older kids specifically, everything that's offered at LB, middle school and high school, they have up on their website right now, that will be including transportation and free of charge for all of our Albany students, which is an amazing opportunity. So if I let the cat out of the bag, but just that one, my gosh, right?
That's a good cat to let out of the bag. And layered on that is transportation, that we will have pick kids up at hub sites to get them to LB and to get them back home to one of our district school sites near where they live. That whole process is being worked out, including which bus drivers we have available this summer, because we are asking the staff who typically don't work in the summer, do you have time available? And we are putting those pieces together. So credit opportunities at LBCC, we're looking at the high schools and what they would offer for maybe you have taken a class and you just have a little bit more to finish to get the credit. So how do we do credit cleanup as well as new credit, and looking at that as well. I see a question, will swim lessons be available at the pool or another outdoor pool? We are working with them to target one of our third or fourth grade, having all those students available to attend the cool pool. If you're part of our district summer program, that would be something we're taking you to or from the pool, but you don't have to be part of the district summer program to access that specific piece, as well as bike safety, I think was our target for fifth graders. So yes, they're not able to do all students, but we can target one of the grades that typically do attend those kind of trainings, I guess you could say.
Yep, so water and bike safety will run through the summer. A question about BEBT. I did see that that was kind of extended, or more funds were put into that. I don't know when that families will actually see that, probably in the coming weeks. I just heard about that, I want to say yesterday. And so I anticipate that it'll be coming, but we don't know what that looks like or the timing on that.
I see Katie asked how many camps can each GAPS kid do? And at this point, we don't have a limit. As many as we're able to connect kids with. Some families might want to fill up the summer and others might want to just partially fill up the summer. So that's part of the mix of trying to break down a barrier for every GAPS child or teen participating. And there's different things to experience. And so we're hoping to connect families as much as we can.
Okay, thank you, Heather. We're going to jump on into the budget, and then I see that we've got more questions. Keep adding those questions to the chat. We're going to jump in and give a quick summary of the budget, and then open those questions up again. And Chris, I saw that you're here, so if you want to turn your camera on and just give a quick wave, that would be great. Chris Norman is our budget committee chair, and he's done it before, he's doing it again, and so he must just really love. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I've prepped. Go ahead. Go right ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah. So I've actually served. My name is Chris Norman. I'm the budget committee chair this year. I've been on the budget committee for a few years. I'm on the budget committee for a couple reasons. One is that I think most people don't understand just how critical the budget is and how much work goes into it. I've got a little bit of background professionally about this, and so I thought that was a great place to get involved with GAPS. But the other reason I am is that I think there's a lot of places where, particularly people I talk with, say, why doesn't GAPS do X, Y, or Z? Why can't we get fill in the blank? And I'm sure all of us I've gone through GAPS. I've got kids that are in GAPS right now. And it's amazing once you get into the budget process, how much thought goes into that, as well as how many tough decisions get made. And so part of why I'm here tonight is to reach out for the people that are participating and hear what your concerns are, as well as encourage you to get involved with the budget process. You can take a look at the materials, which I know were linked to in the documents that were sent out with this meeting. There's a lot of other places where you can get the details about it, but we really want to make sure that it isn't just the committee and the school board that sit on that committee sort of deliberating and debating about that. We want to hear from as many people as possible about what they're seeing in the budget, what's important to them, and the decisions that we need to make.
Thank you, Chair Norman. So with that, I thought I would drop us through very quickly some of what the Budget Committee has already heard, and then that might give you all context for what questions to ask and what feedback to give regarding the budget. So this was all already presented to the Budget Committee along with the proposed budget. And so one of the things that we need to do is make a proposed budget to the Budget Committee, and the Budget Committee is made up of the 5 school board members and then 5 community members. So a total of 10 folks make up the Budget Committee. And one of the things that that we're always working on with the budget is how much money are we going to be receiving per pupil from the state school fund in a given year? And then how many pupils do we have? Are we anticipating having? What will our enrollment look like? And will that be higher or lower than the last year? Those two things give us kind of that flat amount that we're anticipating receiving from the state. And then the other complexity that gets added is that almost all of our budget in schools, and not just in GAPS, is people-based. So almost everything is personnel. And so what you see is costs such as insurance, costs such as cost of living, all of those expenses end up really changing our bottom line really rapidly, and more rapidly than folks might think should happen. And most of the time, excuse me, those expenses may outpace the growth of the state school fund that we're getting for each pupil. So one of the things that we looked at this year was, where are we able to look at staff that we have in our general fund budget and use the one-time dollars from the elementary, secondary schools, excuse me, emergency relief fund, in order to help us offset some of the costs that we see associated within the general fund, which is typically the money that we have. ESSER, that relief fund, are dollars that have been given to school districts by the federal government, specifically due to the impact on schools from COVID. And so we'll have had 3 different ESSER grants given to us as a school district, and those dollars help us address the holes in the budget that were created by purchasing all the PP&E and changing out all of the furniture and hiring additional staff in certain areas where we needed it, or keeping staff employed rather than laying off workers. All of those things, those ESSER dollars were created to help us not have a budget shortfall. So you'll see that there are certain places where we have looked strategically at our budget, excuse me, to try and make sure that we protect what's called the general fund budget, which is most of the money that we are looking at, to try and keep the same level of staffing, or a higher level of staffing, allocated for our kids. So one of the things that you can see is that we have moved $2.5 million of salary and benefit costs to those emergency relief funds. We have also we made a decision to maintain our staff despite the declining enrollment. So we decided that even though our numbers were going to go down a little bit, so sorry, because I'm on my phone, I'll get interrupted occasionally by people calling, I think. Despite our declining enrollment, we decided not to cut staff. We wanted to maintain the staff that we have employed. And what we know is that when enrollment stabilizes, we want to make every effort to right size the staffing at that point in time, so that our class sizes aren't too big, but we also don't have class sizes that are incredibly small. Investments that we're looking to make are really exciting. So part of these dollars, in addition to those dollars that I just referenced, we also have accounts called the student investment account. Those dollars, if you remember, before COVID, so over a year ago, we in Oregon had a corporate activities tax approved, and the resources from that corporate activities tax are placed into the student investment account. And those dollars can be used for a number of different priorities, including lowering class sizes for our youngest students, looking at library and media services, looking at technologies, looking at credit recovery, looking at pre-K. There's a whole bunch of different areas, looking at social, emotional, and mental health, looking at equity. And so we built that plan last year, right as COVID was coming into play. And then we ended up not getting fully funded because COVID hit the state budget unexpectedly in a way where the state just didn't quite know how that was going to end up hurting the state. So we ended up not getting as much of those dollars as we anticipated for this school year. We are now looking at quite a bit more money for next school year, which allows us to expand those investments. So coupling with the ESSER dollars that we've been able to take a look at our monies, these are the investments we're making. Instructional coaches and counselors at our elementary schools. So if you have a child in elementary school, you know that your elementary school doesn't have a counselor. So we have set aside the resources for every elementary school to have a counselor or someone with a master's in social work or a mental health therapist. We are hiring 2 middle school librarians, and they will cover the 4 middle schools. We are looking at expanding the Albany Options School to include 9th and 10th grade. Right now it serves 11th and 12th grade really well. One of the things that we know from this last 15 months is that we are going to have students who are transitioning into 9th and 10th grade who may need additional supports and who may need that different setting. And so how can we make that work for our students? And so we need to set aside resources for that. We are expanding our pre-K programming. We are reducing through these dollars our kindergarten and our first grade class sizes down to 18 for next year. So that will be 18 students to 1 teacher. And then we're also investing in additional behavior support, such as contracts with Lynn County Public Health for additional bicultural and bilingual mental health therapists. Looking at additional equity training and including an equity executive director who we're in the process of hiring right now to be able to oversee all of this work that we have been doing. We are looking to add 2 modular units to expand our capacity and permit social distancing in some of our schools. So we just don't have enough physical classrooms in some of the buildings right now. We anticipate that given that we'll have a very large kindergarten class coming in next year, and that next year's 5th grade class will be also quite large, our elementary schools will have more students in them than is typical. And we know that we are going to have, for the 1 year of next year, some space issues that we're going to need to address. We are eliminating sports participation fees for next year, and our hope is to do that on into the future as a permanent change. And then, as you already heard, we are expanding dramatically our summer school enrichment and remediation program. Other investments that are made possible through this budget is a new transportation facility. So if you've paid attention, there are a lot more buses on the road in Gaps than there were 10 or 15 years ago, but the space that houses where all of those buses are supposed to park and where all of those drivers are supposed to spend their time is really ancient and old. So we are needing to make sure that we get that upgraded. We have some bond projects that we've set aside dollars to finish up. And we have a budget director. Jim is here on an interim basis, and we have hired Ashley Netzel as our new budget director. So those are investments. And so that leaves us with just about 20 minutes, which was what I had hoped to be able to give to Chris for us to answer questions related to the budget, but then also questions related to any of the other items. I see we have a few questions already in the chat. And so I will get out of sharing my screen for you and we can go ahead and start answering your questions. Lisa, if you could read them, those would be great.
Sure. So I'm going to just read the ones that haven't been answered.
Thank you.
Haven't been answered yet. That one, is there any specific offered for transitioning from 5th grade to middle school? So I know that all middle schools are offering tours. I think they'll be virtual here in the spring, and then some in-person things later in August. Your elementary school should have information about that. Those transitions usually happen probably late May with their corresponding middle school. Amy asks, or just says, Albany Online has worked really well for my 3 children. This school year, are summer class options going to be available using those platforms? Amy, the answer is yes. So if students have the energy and the zest to, take a class or 2 over the summer, yes, those platforms will be available. Melissa Turk says,
I see that. I've got that question. So the question is around when elementary school pauses cohorts. Melissa's having a hard time with our staff giving a definition around what does paused mean. And I think in the term that you're talking about, where we have an impacted cohort that is staying home, yes, they are reverting to comprehensive distance learning during that time period. So you're probably right. We should look at changing that language so that it's more consistent. So we will do that. Thank you so much for doing that.
Donna asks, will the Chromebooks be turned back in for the summer? The answer to that, I believe, is no, because students may be using them over the summer if they're going to any of the summer school or if they are doing any of the academic classes at LB, and we know they may need them. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No.
I was going on to Brenda's question. So I was just going to say, Andrew, could you please paste the link to the LBCC summer options in the chat so that folks can take a look at what those options are? Danielle, my middle school students are very concerned about fellow students not wearing their mask appropriately or taking it down randomly. Is there any general disciplinary procedures or exclusionary consequences for non-compliant in-person students? So, well, first, we really try to help folks learn the new behavior, help students understand the expectations, and help give them the supports that they need to change their behavior and learn the new behaviors. So there are different things that they're doing within the schools. If things get excessive, obviously we're having conversations with families outside of just talking to the student. And then there are steps that we may take, but you will unlikely know that those steps are being taken. So if you do have concerns, specific concerns, please contact your child's teacher or your child's principal. Is it possible to include full-time aides in our K-5 classrooms to help with both behavioral support and learning gaps? Thank you, Kate. And I think we can add that to Chris's list of things to bring back to the budget committee. I think that's a good suggestion.
So I have the next one. August just says, hey, in regards to additional modular units, please remember that part of what was presented to the local community and voters when the current bond was passed was that we'd be moving away from those types of units for future expansion and instead consolidating and building new schools. Absolutely. I also would say that that was pre-pandemic and before we realized that we would have our 4th grade class this year in our district, I mean, all the way through our district, is just a bigger class for whatever reason. That paired with the incoming kinder class, which we know will also be huge, just presents this really odd 1 year issue that will be more of an issue at some schools than others based on space. So we'll certainly try and use all of the available space. And we also know that space is finite. And so trying to figure out how we get some schools when we know they will run out of space right now for the fall. Kids are coming and we'll need to fix that. So
yeah, and I would just add to that, that one of the things that the reason that the money has been approved from the state is partly because, is primarily because the social distancing requirements the state has put into place have actually created schools that are now too small. Our schools weren't too small because we had enough classrooms, but became too small. This is across the state because of social distancing requirements. So we are actually asking the state, thank you, Russ Buttram, our Executive Director of Operations, who is asking for some perhaps flexibility around looking at some stick-built solutions rather than only having the state only want to invest those dollars in modulars. We agree that it would be preferred to have it be part of our actual school.
Calvin has, my only child is transitioning into middle school next year. I have no idea what to do. How is the schedule determined? What supports are in place for students? So this spring, you'll do something that they call forecasting, which is essentially they'll talk to students about what middle school looks like and what the different classes are and what some of the class offerings might be in terms of electives. They'll have information that students will bring home to their parents to say, you know, this is kind of what it looks like. Supports in place for students. That is a broad question. So I would say, I'm assuming you mean for transition, but there will be specific events that are aimed just at 6th graders. 6th graders also at the beginning of school go for a day by themselves as they kind of navigate what that all looks like before 7th and 8th grade come. And so again, all of that transition activity usually starts here at the end of May and includes their home middle school, you know, wherever that is.
Okay. Melanie asks, will it be possible for AOL students to take electives at the middle schools next year? Lisa, that question would be for you.
Mm-hmm. I would say it may be possible and is something that we're working on to try and figure out kind of what that might look like. And of course, that would always be depending on the space at whatever the home middle school would be for the student who is at AOL. So I think we are still working on that. I think it is possible, but I will always say it's space dependent.
Amy asks, regarding the budget, what additional, if any, mental and emotional health supports will be given to students in middle schools? So whoops.
Oh, this is so exciting.
This is so exciting. Go ahead. You can answer.
I'll do and then you do. Okay, so a few things I would say. One, we've partnered with some outside organizations and agencies to be able to offer some more mental health resources. So one of those examples is a partnership we have that we just started with Ophelia's Place, specifically for middle school students. This is aimed really at small groups, also individual therapy, and that's specifically for girls. We also have partnered with, of course, Lynn County mental health, and our middle schools have 2 counselors at each middle school. Our elementary didn't have any, that's why we started there, to be able to provide therapists in middle school for those students who need to see them for like individual therapy. And then go ahead, Melissa. I'm not sure.
No, I think that's great. I think I would just also add that we are looking at for our students who are historically underserved, what student groups have, such as student mentoring groups of students mentoring each other, but also adults mentoring students as well. Where can we have those expand? So an example of that would be at Memorial Middle School this year. We have mentoring program for Black students that was kind of a trial to see how that worked in partnership with leaders from the NAACP. That has gone really well. We know that we are looking at expanding that at other schools who are interested in that. We know that there are other opportunities for students to be engaging in programs as well. So there are a lot of different ways that we want to try and meet those needs for our middle school kids.
And I would say to both Kate and Calvin, Kate, I absolutely agree. I hear you. We have been in that spot ourselves. It is so hard to find pediatric providers in our area. So we really are trying to remove any barrier and provide space and access as much as possible at schools. And Calvin, I would really, I hear you there too. Please feel free to reach out to your school principal for help. Reach out to the district office so that we can try and figure out how to get you hooked up with what you might need. Kate also asks discussion on allowing parent volunteers into the school again. And she said, you know, part of the conversation. So a few things I would want folks to really know. One, the guidelines and requirements that we follow right now are set out by the state in the Ready Schools Safe Learners. And you'll hear people say RSSL. And one of the requirements says that you can't have any volunteers who are non-essential volunteers. And then it lists example of what essential volunteers would be. And that would be things like maybe a DHS worker is coming to make contact with a student or things like that. I anticipate that some of those things may be either relaxed or go away for the fall, but I know for the end of the school year, I don't anticipate that there will be change this school year for that, is specifically regarding volunteers. And I certainly don't think that will probably change, especially since I know for our county, I think we have the highest case counts in our county that we've ever had during this whole time. So although my crystal ball is not, you know, clear, it broke a long, long time ago. I don't see that probably happening this school year, but I do probably for the fall.
So we've got a little extra time now, and we've still got Chris on the line. And what I thought might be helpful, Chris, is if there's anything that that kind of struck you as part of our conversation that we've had with the budget committee so far, questions that people have come up with that you think might be helpful to ask, or information that you would like to hear more from our parents, now is a great time to do that.
Yeah, I think I was also encouraged, as was Lisa, and I think you were as well, about some of the requests and comments around particularly therapy for the middle school and grade school level. That actually has been a long conversation that we've had. And so I was excited to see in this year's budget, there now is some funding for that at the elementary level. I think that was already the case before the pandemic. And I think there's been a lot of concern about post-pandemic. There's going to be a lot of things that we'll be dealing with. And so I'm excited to see that. I think in some cases, it's probably still not enough. I think the other thing is with some of these additional funding streams, there's been a lot of creative ways that the school has budgeted this year that have been kind of on the wish list, that this has been an opportunity to make some of those now happen. I also encourage you, again, this has been great feedback. I've got some notes here that I'm going to bring to the meeting tomorrow. If you think about things after this meeting, I think you can still submit those through noon tomorrow. Is that correct, Melissa? So I would highly encourage you to do that as you maybe reflect on the conversation. Please get those in, because that's a big way that we make sure that we're reflecting what the community wants from our schools. I will say that this year's budget was a nice change. Most of the time we're looking at what we can't do or what we don't have the funding to do. And because of some of these funding streams we talked about tonight, a lot of those things we're able to make happen. I'm hoping we can make them happen for a long period, not just this sort of one-time thing, but obviously that will help when we get a little bit more stable enrollment. So it's been great. I feel for Jim trying to build a budget with the enrollment numbers that are literally way up in the air right now. So I'm hoping that in the next 6 to 12 months, we'll really know how many people are in Albany schools. And then for the next budget cycle, we'll be a little bit more stable ground.
The one thing I would just make a plea to for anybody out there is that if you know folks who are licensed clinical social workers or degrees in social work or counseling, one of the things we know is we're having trouble, just like I'm sure other districts are, hiring enough. And so when we partner with other organizations, oftentimes they have staff or are able to hire them more efficiently than we are in terms of mental health. But I just say that to let people know we're hiring social workers and counselors. I think we've hired 6 already. That posting is still open. And I'm sure we're competing with other agencies and districts to do that, because I agree that, Chris, I appreciate you saying this has long been a conversation, and I still don't think it's enough. We will need more, and part of that will not only be funding, but we'll be finding people.
So just a couple last pieces before, as we wind up, I just want to read that Kate also mentioned that occupational therapy is very hard to get into, and basically anything that has the word therapy in it is really hard to get into locally, definitely. So I appreciate that. Amy for the budget committee asks Chris that you bring back that classrooms are disrupted and all students are impacted when mental and emotional health needs are not met. I'm heartened that this is being made a priority, and I hope it can continue to be at the forefront of continuing debates on funding. Andrew, for everybody who's on the call, has linked for you in the chat instructions on how to submit public comment for the budget committee meeting. So you can just click on that link and follow those instructions if you're interested in that. And I know that Chair Norman would be so excited to have a couple public comments for the budget committee meeting. And then Anna says, please put more funding and opportunities toward outdoor science and learning, including field trips with transportation. Yes, thank you. Great point. Smaller class sizes at all levels, as well as green school transitions and ways to address effects of solastalgia, which is a word I don't know the exact meaning of, but I think it would be time without the sun, but I might be wrong, Anna.
I love that, because I'm gonna look it up.
I'm gonna look it up right now.
Word today.
I'm so excited.
Nostalgia is like the longing for something. So, and soul is sun. So is it like the longing for more sun? That's what I'm gonna guess. Hold on, let's look.
All right, so it is now 6:57. We have staff that are gonna need just a quick break before our 7 o'clock meeting, which is going to be in Spanish, and we need our Spanish staff, speaking staff, to get on. So that is it tonight for the English version. And thank you so much for joining us tonight and for providing us feedback. And you all have a really wonderful rest of the evening. It's still beautiful blue sky, so maybe go outside and get out in the sun a little bit. Good night. Thank you guys. Thank you so much.